Good morning. Just want to reiterate what Brian said. Happy Father's Day. Most of y'all know I lost my father just a little over a year ago, very unexpectedly. So today's bittersweet. It's kind of weird because last time I spoke here at the church, it was my father's birthday. So I got to make sure next time I plan something that it's not related to my father. This was not planned for me. I didn't plan it to be on Father's Day when the elders got together and were looking at who was going to take what topics and what characters from the Bible. I chose this one just for the fact I remember hearing Joseph in the Robe of Many Colors a lot when I was growing up, and it just worked with my schedule. We've been gone actually for the last 2 weeks, so it's really good to be back. And I just picked it because of my schedule. And then after I picked it and started studying, I realized it was on Father's Day. So it is a little tough for me today. They say the third time's a charm. This is my third time speaking in front of the church. But I'll let you guys make that decision and not me. But it is glad to be back. I was dealing with some family stuff 2 weeks ago with my father's estate and my mom. I would ask for prayers for her. She's battling stage 4 bone cancer. So that's been a tough road as well. But also got to enjoy some time with my brother. We got to go to church together 2 Sundays ago, which made this topic, Joseph, even harder. Because when I started really digging into this topic of Joseph, I remembered it was a bunch of family problems and sibling problems. So it kind of opened my eyes to where I needed to be. So when I started studying this, I'm really preaching to myself more than anybody else. Tina and I got to enjoy vacation last week. We were at the beach, and it was probably the first vacation we actually got to relax and not be needing a vacation when you get back from a vacation. But I'm thankful that I had the Lord in my life when I was on vacation. Because if I didn't, I probably wouldn't be here now. I'd probably be in jail somewhere. The last day we were there, we were on the beach, and we saw this little kiddie pool that somebody had brought up. Filled it with water, and there was a little tent, and I thought this would be a good spot to put down young people, little kids, and it's probably a good family. And 20 minutes later, the music was blaring for everybody on the beach to hear, and it was very, very obscene and vulgar language in that. And I was just shocked that with her kids there that she would continue to play that, and even leave at times to go to the beach for 20, 30 minutes and leave the radio blaring. So I'm very thankful that I had God in my life, and I knew that I would be speaking this morning. It probably wouldn't be good if y'all were recording me from jail doing the sermon. I apologize up front for the glasses. I remember when I was a little boy in church, and our pastor would put them on and off and on and off and on and off, and I was like, would he just leave those things on or off? I get it today. At 48 years old, and I had to go to Plan B and get Wade's iPad, which is smaller than my computer. So I'm struggling this morning with seeing my notes. We've talked about Abraham, we've talked about Isaac, we've talked about Jacob. Today I'll be talking about Joseph. See, Abraham becomes the patriarch of the Jewish nation. God commands him to totally commit to him and to him only. His faith is tested when he's asked to sacrifice his son Isaac, which I couldn't even imagine what he must have been thinking. Then there is Isaac. He was a great patriarch of the Israelites. Of course, his father was Abraham, his mother was Sarah, the father of Jacob and the grandfather of the 12 tribes of Israel. Then there's Jacob, the second born of twins. His brother was Esau. However, he stole his brother's birthright by tricking him and his father. Which leads me to, you would think that Jacob wouldn't show favoritism with his boys when favoritism was shown in his family as well. How often have you, when you were growing up and your mom or dad had these certain traits or certain things they did or said or mannerisms that you swore you would never do, that you would never take over? How'd that work out for you? I remember my dad would get up early in the morning, he'd start whistling. First thing in the morning is whistle, whistle, whistle. And I was like, oh my God, how can somebody be that happy this early in the morning? And then 25 or 30 years later, I'd get up and start whistling. And now Peyton whistles. I whistle all the time at work. And I just catch myself whistling all the time. And everybody looks at me like I'm crazy. And it echoes a lot in that government building. But it's something I swore I'd never do. Another thing, my dad was a really tough man. He had calluses all over his hand because of his hard work. And he would constantly be picking the calluses, and it would drive me crazy. I do it all the time now. All the time. But one thing we will see that's common through all these generations is family problems. More specifically, sibling problems. There was Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers. We're going to talk about God's call on Joseph, how he handled the situation. And see, a lot of times we want to answer God's call or follow God's call when it's easy. But how about when it's hard? So we'll see in Joseph's life that it didn't appear to be ever easy. Other than he got a really nice coat in the beginning of the story. I think about a guy I used to work with. He was a trooper, kind of in the upstate, lived in Abbeville. His name was Shannon Chastain. Shannon was an awesome trooper. He was sharp as a tack. He's the guy you'd want to put on the cover of the billboards. He was a great canine handler. But his heart was hard. He hated everybody, was always mad at the world. But something between me and him connected, and I always knew there was something special about him that he didn't know about himself. Shannon was not a believer. He would attend church once every month or so like Southern Baptists are supposed to, right? One day during church, he said he really didn't like the church he was going to. It was really small. It was really dead. Nobody was doing anything. He'd already talked with his wife about attending another church, but she didn't want to hear it. So the one Sunday, the quarter that he went to church, during the middle of the service, he walked up and went to the altar during the service, which you just don't do. And started crying like a baby. Got up and walked straight out the back doors, and his wife came out of the car and asked him, was he okay? He said, I'm not. He said, but I just surrendered my life to Christ. And will you follow me to this church I know that we're supposed to be at? He said he knew right then God had called him to pastor. He said, but he knew that he would never give up a career he worked so hard at, which was the highway patrol. He gave his life to Christ. 4 months later, he's on the roof of the church that he just joined working on it when he fell off. Broke both legs so severely that he had to medically retire from the highway patrol at 30-something years old. He said it took God literally to humble him to his knees. Literally. Because he said, I never would have answered God's call, even though I knew he was calling me. I knew it was going to be hard, but I never would have answered that call had he not thrown me off the roof of a church and broke my legs. Fast forward, I remember where I was at when he called me to tell me he was going to Bible college. I remember 4 years later when he graduated. I remember when he called me to tell me God had called him to Washington State to pastor from Abbeville, South Carolina. I remember we were at the camp when the phone rang and he said, we're on the way. And I said, Shannon, where's your church? Where's your church at? He's like, I don't know. I said, Shannon, where you going to live at? He said, I don't know. I said, you don't have a house? He said, nope. I said, you don't have a church? He said, nope. I said, I honestly thought he was crazy, and he probably did too at times. He said, the only thing I know is kind of the general area of Washington State where I'm supposed to go. Other than that, we don't have a plan. He stopped in the Badlands to do some pictures, and a guy walks by, and Shannon asked him, could he take their family picture? The guy immediately recognized Shannon was not from the area because he had a very southern accent, probably like most of y'all think I do. And the guy asked him where he was from, and he told him where he was going, and he told him, and he asked him, was he vacationing? And no, he said, no, I'm moving. And he said, where are you moving to? And he told him, the guy goes, that's where I live. You're moving to my hometown. Here's my number. Call me when you get there. I'll try to help you find the location. Not a whole lot transpired out of that interaction other than Shannon knew that was just God confirming what he was doing was right. Shannon's first Sunday preaching, he preached to his wife and 2 boys. And that was it. Fast forward 4 or 5 years later, they're kind of outgrowing their church. Not that it's not been hard and difficult. It's a very hard and difficult part of the country to live. City Church was able to bless them a few months ago by giving them some money to help buy a snow plow so they could actually snow plow their parking lot just to get to church. So I think about Chastain family and what they did when God called. And this morning we're going to talk about Joseph's life story. If I could go back in time, I probably would not pick Joseph because of what it's dealing with. But I believe there was a reason I was supposed to teach this one. I believe there was a huge lesson I was supposed to learn about forgiveness and healing a family. In Genesis 37, 1 through 4, it says, "So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan where his father had lived. This is the history of Jacob's family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flock, and with his brothers, the sons of his father's wife, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Now Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day he gave Joseph a special gift, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because of their father's partiality. They couldn't say a kind word about him. So why was Joseph the favorite son? The Bible says it's because he was born to Jacob in his old age. He was the first son with Rachel, which for whatever reasons, Jacob thought he was special. Then there's the robe. I've always heard about this robe in vacation Bible school, and some people said it was a robe, some people said it was a coat. It was a coat of many colors. Some say that the sleeves maybe were a different color. Some say the whole coat was an array of different colors. See, back then in those times, anything with a bunch of different colors in it, the yarn would have to be dyed, which would make this probably a very, very expensive coat. It's probably not a coat that he would go out and tend the flocks with or the sheep with or work in the yard with and cut grass. It would be something that would be worn on special occasions. Some interpretations say that maybe it was long, but it was something significant, so he would wear it probably on special occasions. And then in Genesis 37, 5 through 11, it says, "One night Joseph had a dream and promptly reported the details to his brothers, causing them to hate him even more. 'Listen to this dream,' he announced. 'We are out in the field tying up bundles of grain. My bundle stood up, and then your bundles all gathered around and bowed before it. So you're going to be our king, are you?' his brothers taunted. And they hated him all the more for this dream and what he had said. Then Joseph had another dream and told his brothers about it. 'Listen to this dream,' he said. 'The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me.' This time he told his father as well as his brothers, and his fathers rebuked him. 'What do you mean?' his father asked. 'Will your mother, your brothers not actually come and bow before you?' But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father gave it some thought and wondered what it all meant. So we hear a lot in Joseph in the book of Genesis about dreams, the dreams. I never have those dreams. I never have the dreams where God is directing me exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and to stay fast. I wish I did. Of all nights, I was thinking last night, I very seldom have a lot of dreams. And last night, I could not sleep for anything. Tina might not even know I got up 3 or 4 times and actually went down to our new spare bed and got in it. And I dreamed that I was on a plane crash. I dreamed that we were coming down. The pilot had said we were going to crash, but we were coming across this big cornfield, and that we were just going to kind of glide across the cornfield and come to a landing. And right as we're about to land, and everybody's bracing, he pulls it back up, and we go straight back up. And then we go straight back down. And right before we crash, I wake up, and I was thinking, why didn't he just land in the cornfield? We had it. James Gregory, a comedian, used to say, when you get on an airplane, it always talks about the flotation device. The seat will turn into a flotation device. He goes, do you know 98.2% of all flights do not go across water? He goes, you let me know when you invent a seat that will bounce across a cornfield, then I'll start back flying. But that's the kind of dreams I have. I remember when Tina and I were going to wanted to commit to the camp. Was that something we were supposed to do? We literally looked at each other the night before we had to make a decision and said, let's pray about it. Let's hope we have a dream about it and wake up and we'll know our answer. And that's not what happened. But we did get our answer about 10 o'clock that next morning, but it wasn't from a dream. See, in the beginning, Joseph kind of sounds like he's maybe a know-it-all. He's the daddy's pet. And in the South, we would say he's a tattle teller. because he runs back and tells his dad all the things that his brothers are not doing. You'll hear in a few minutes when we go through some of the characteristics of Joseph, some of his characteristics, first being humble. Not so sure this was humble in the beginning, because it's almost like he was arrogant, and that he was telling his brothers what they would be doing in the future and how they would be bowing low before him. So maybe I would reword that a little different if I'd have been Joseph, but Joseph did what Joseph was supposed to do. In Genesis 37:12 through 17, it says, soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to the pasture their flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, your brothers are over at Shechem with the flocks. I'm going to send you to them. Again, he's going to tattletale. I'm ready to go, Joseph replied, and go see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along, Jacob said. Then come back and bring me word. So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from his home in the valley of Hebron. When he arrived there, a man noticed him wandering around the countryside. What are you looking for? He asked. For my brothers and their flocks, Joseph replied. Have you seen them? Yes, the man told him. But they're no longer here. I heard your brothers say they were going to Dothan. So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. See, Joseph was going out again to check up on his brothers. And you can imagine the brothers, how they felt, because every time they would go work and Joseph's not there, why isn't he working? We're out here working. That he would show up and then leave and then report things back to his brother, because you could see how the animosity is probably building up. But in Genesis 37:18 through 36, Joseph sold into slavery. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance and made plans to kill him. Here comes the dreamer, they exclaimed. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into a deep pit. We can tell our fathers that a wild animal has eaten him. Then we will see what becomes of his dreams. But Reuben came to Joseph's rescue. Let's not kill him, he said. Why should we shed his blood? Let's just throw him alive into this pit here. Let's just don't kill him immediately. Let's let him suffer for a while. That way he will die without our having to touch him. But Reuben was secretly planning to help Joseph escape, and then he would bring him back to his father. So when Joseph arrived, they pulled off his beautiful robe, threw him into this pit. The pit was normally used to store water, but it was empty at the time. Then just as they were sitting down to eat, they noticed a caravan of camels in the distance coming towards them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking spices, balm, myrrh from Gilead to Egypt. Judah said to the others, what can we gain by killing our brother? That would give us a guilty conscience. Let's sell Joseph to the Ishmaelite traders. Let's not be responsible for his death. After all, he is our brother. And his brothers agreed, so when the traders came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver. And the Ishmaelite traders took him along to Egypt. Sometime later, Reuben returned to get Joseph out of the pit, and when he discovered that Joseph was missing, he tore his clothes in anguish and frustration. Then when he went back to his brothers and lamented, the boy is gone. What can I do now? Then Joseph's brothers killed a goat, dipped the robe in its blood. They took the beautiful robe to their father and asked him to identify it. We found this in the field, they told him. It's Joseph's robe, isn't it? Their father recognized it at once. Yes, he said, it's my son's robe. A wild animal has attacked and eaten him. Surely Joseph has been torn into pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes and put on sackcloth. He mourned deeply for his son for many days. His family all tried to comfort him, but it was no use. I will die in mourning for my son, he would say, and they began to weep. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the traders sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was the captain of the palace guard. See, Joseph was sold into slavery. It was all based on a bunch of lies and deceit, favoritism, jealousy, hatred. But in Genesis 39, 1 through 23, I won't read all of it. Joseph is in Potiphar's house, the palace guard of Pharaoh. Potiphar immediately realizes that Joseph is being blessed by the Lord. So Potiphar puts Joseph in charge of his place. And at that time, you see where Potiphar's household begins to be blessed. But unfortunately, Potiphar's wife starts, I guess you would say, flirting with Joseph, tries to seduce Joseph. But Joseph flees, he runs. God always tells us there's an open door if we'll just take it. So when she tries to seduce him and he tries to flee and run, she tears a piece of his clothing and takes it to Potiphar and goes, Joseph tried to rape me. So at that point, Joseph is thrown into prison. But Joseph, being Joseph, immediately becomes the favorite in prison. The prison guard immediately, or the warden immediately knows the favor that Joseph has as well and puts him in charge of everything. While he's in prison, Joseph meets Pharaoh's former chief cupbearer and chief chef. They were thrown into prison, don't really know why. But they start having these crazy dreams, and one day they share it with Joseph. Joseph tells them he can interpret the dreams. Probably after he interpreted the chef's dream, he wished he wouldn't have interpreted it. But he tells the cupbearer, in 3 days you will be restored to your position with Pharaoh. But unfortunately for the chief chef, your head will be decapitated and put on a pole in 3 days. So 3 days go by, and that's exactly what happened. But before the chief cupbearer goes back to Pharaoh, Joseph tells him, hey, remember me. Remember me. Remember what I did for you. When you get back to Pharaoh, tell him that I'm innocent, that none of these things I've done are true. Go to bat for me. So as any friend would do when he got back to Pharaoh, he only worried about himself and himself only. Forgets totally about Joseph. Until Pharaoh has a dream. And I think this may have been several years later. Pharaoh starts having these dreams, and at that point the chief chef goes, oh yeah, I remember this dude that I was locked up in prison with a few years ago that interpreted my dream. He interpreted the chef's dream, and exactly what he said happened. And Pharaoh said, retrieve him here. So Pharaoh asked him at this point, or tells him what his dreams were, and Joseph interprets them. And a long story short, basically Joseph says, in your land there's going to be 7 years of feast, followed by 7 years of famine. And Pharaoh asks him, well, what do I do? How do I prepare for it? And Joseph tells him, you need to put somebody in charge that knows how to handle this situation, knows how to handle the 7 years of feast, but doesn't get lazy and forget about the 7 years of famine that's following. So at that point, Pharaoh puts Joseph in charge. Basically, Joseph is in charge, second in charge of all of this land, this whole country. And in Genesis 42, 1 through 38, we see where Joseph's brothers are now suffering. They don't have food. They're hungry. They're looking for somewhere to go. So where do they come? They come to Egypt. Joseph sees them, immediately recognizes, those are my brothers. But they don't recognize him. So he tells, I guess, his workers, laborers, fill their bags with all the food that you can put in it, put their money back in it, tie them up, send them back. But at that point, Joseph remembers the dreams that he had had so many years ago about how his brothers and family would bow before him, but most specifically how he was to be put in a place that he could take care of them. He sends them back with their food and money, and then in Genesis 43, 1 through 34, we see Joseph's brothers come back to Egypt because they're out of food. Joseph told them if they did come back again and they're out of food, to make sure they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin. See, Jacob and Rachel had had another son, Benjamin, but Jacob didn't want to send him because he didn't want to lose another son, especially by Rachel. But Joseph tells them, I won't give you any food or anything else unless you bring him back with you. So when they come back for the second time, Joseph has them over for dinner. He sits a table for all of them to sit at. Not only does he set a table for them all to sit at, he sits them by their age, which they thought that was really weird. How does this man know our birthplace, our ages? It even says in the scripture that Joseph has to leave the room several times because he's caught up in so much emotion. Now, whether that emotion was, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to kill him or if I'm going to try to save him, I don't know. But it says he was caught up in emotion. Because I think a lot of times we think people in the Bible in the biblical days were not human. Sometimes we think of them as superheroes, cartoon characters, or just a story. But it said Joseph was caught up with emotion. In Genesis 44, it says Joseph put their money back in their grain bags again. But this time he put a silver cup of his in a bag, tied it up, and sent them back again, along with their money. On the way back to their land, Joseph sent a horseman out to follow them, stopped them, and said that the silver cup was missing. And whoever had it in their bag would pay a deep price, would be a slave forever. So they open all the bags. When they get to the last one, of course, it's the youngest brother, Benjamin's. One of the brothers steps in and goes, please don't take him. Please don't make him into a slave. Please don't harm him because our father back home can't lose another son. I'll take his place. At that point, Joseph was overcome with so much emotion that he finally told them who he was. I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall during that time to see the reaction of these guys. Do you run up and hug your brothers? Or do you pull out a sword and tell your men to kill them for what they've done? In Genesis 47, it says at this point, Joseph sends his brothers back to retrieve his father, for him to journey back to Egypt. And God speaks to Jacob and tells him on his journey back to Egypt, I'm going to make your family into a great nation. Jacob reunites with his father. Jacob asked to go see Pharaoh so he could bless him. And 17 years later, Jacob dies in the land that God had promised. I want to talk about a few principles of Joseph's life. I think about this story and how he could continue to do what he did. How could he continue to uphold some of these character traits we're going to talk about? I know me, I have one bad day at work and I'm ready to throw it all in. The first one I think about is principle. Think about Joseph's character, his integrity. He was honest, even though he was tempted many times. See, the next one is humble. You know, we talked about humble in the beginning. Maybe could have handled that situation a little bit better with his brothers in the beginning, but I wasn't there and I don't know exactly the atmosphere that was there at the time, but it seemed like he was maybe a little bit arrogant in the beginning. But he was humble. His position never changed, no matter his circumstances. See, I think about this when I was with the Highway Patrol for 25 years. When somebody got promoted, the first thing they would say, it's not going to change me. It's not going to change who I am. I'm not going to forget where I came from. And as they moved up the ladder, especially when they got way up the chain of command, it was like, is this even the same person that I used to work with? And not everybody, but a majority of the time, they would forget where they come from. They would forget what it was like to be the low man on the totem pole. And I think about Joseph going from all the places he'd been in very low places to the second in charge of a whole country. How could he stay humble? We talk about discipline and faithfulness. He stayed the course no matter his circumstances. He was thrown into a pit. They were going to kill him first, but they were going to let him suffer. Threw him into a pit. He was a slave, accused of something he didn't do, and then put into prison. But stayed disciplined and kept his faith. This one's probably the biggest for me is grace. He showed grace to his brothers for selling them. He showed grace to those who accused him of things he didn't do. I couldn't imagine if Joseph didn't have God in his life, how much blood would have been shed. How the course of history would have been changed. Then there's competence. He did his job with excellence. No matter if it was for a prison guard, for a warden, or for Pharaoh. See, I know a lot of times in our world today, we love to help people if we think we can get help in return from them, or if they can do something for us. It's hard to do something for somebody when you know, matter of fact, it's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you some money. It's going to cost you a lot of time. Which is why we like to give back to the Scooter Scott Project, because we know we're not going to get anything in return. Matter of fact, it's going to cost us something. But the joy you get from that is indescribable. The last one is wise and strategic. See, he was wise in telling Pharaoh how to plan for the 7 years of feast. But even wiser at telling him how to prepare for the 7 years of famine. You know, of course, God had told Joseph some of these things through dreams and had spoken to Joseph. But I go back to Shannon's story that I told earlier. Shannon knew God had called him to preach the day he surrendered. He knew it immediately. He said, I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. I just didn't know if I'd do it. He said, probably more than likely, like 99.99% chance, if I would have not fallen off that church and broken my legs, I'd still be a trooper and not answering God's call. See, sometimes God tells us things. He gives us signs. He gives us dreams. Sometimes he's just right in our face. We know we're supposed to do it, but we fail to prepare. We fail to follow through. I saw this quote recently. It said, our past affects our present and future. By sunrise tomorrow, our actions of today will have become part of the past. Yet they were already begun to shape the future. What actions can you choose or avoid that will positively shape your future? See, your circumstances are never so bad that they are beyond God's help. We never know what good will come out of a seamlessly hopeless situation. We may not always see the effects of our faith, but we can be sure that God will honor our faithfulness. See, I remember when I first met Scooter and we were doing all this stuff through the Scooter Scott Project, he would tell us often, we probably will never see or reap the benefits of what we're doing here in our lifetime. Your children might not even see it. Your grandchildren might not even see it. But one day somebody will. So stay the course and keep the faith. So what is your path? See, Brian spoke a few weeks ago about two brothers that went opposite directions. That has changed or created history forever. Two brothers, two different directions, a country in the Middle East that's still been fighting for thousands of years. See, we don't often think about our daily decisions and the impact it could have for generations to come. I know I don't. I don't think about decisions that I make here in church or when I leave here at church on Father's Day that my great-great-great-grandchildren may benefit from or suffer from. Because usually I think about today. I pray that Tina and I's decisions that we make here on earth will impact a generation for years to come. See, and I often don't think I think I spoke of it a few minutes ago, that these people in the Bible have real emotions. We don't think that we are just like they were, just in a different time of history. They had the same problems. How am I going to make ends meet? Where am I going to work? How am I going to educate my kids? We often think they didn't have the problems that we have today. Truth be known, they probably had way more than we will ever know or can imagine. So will you rejoice in the trying times? Forgive others, stay the course, and continue and serve the Almighty God, no matter the cost. I want to read real quick from Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11 I call a Hall of Fame, Faith Hall of Famers. It says, what is faith? It is the confidence assurance that we hope for is going to happen. It is the evidence of things we cannot yet see. God gave his approval to people in the days of old because of their faith. By faith we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command, and that we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. It was by faith that Abel brought more acceptable offerings to God than Cain. It was by faith, I'm skipping around a little bit, it was by faith that Enoch was taken to heaven without dying. So you see, it's impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that there is a God and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. It was by faith that Noah built an ark. It was by faith Abraham obeyed what God called him to do, to leave his home and to go to another land, and God would give him his inheritance. It was by faith that Sarah, together with Abraham, was able to have a child. All these faithful ones died without receiving what God had promised them. But they saw it all from a distance and welcomed the promises of God. They agreed that they were no more than foreigners and nomads here on earth. And obviously people who talk like that are looking forward to a country that they can call their own. It was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons. And it was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, confidently spoke of God bringing the people out of Israel out of Egypt. He was so sure of it that he commanded them to carry his bones with them when they left. I know we're in trying times right now in this country, but there's nothing no more trying than somebody else has been through in other countries and other parts of history. I recently heard a preacher in California, they were going to close this church down for not obeying the ordinances in California. But they were going to leave the doors open to marijuana dispensaries and all these other things that were essential. But the one place that people could come to when they have no hope, no faith, struggling, they were going to shut down. So he went to his attorney and asked him what they should do. And he told his attorney, I want to fight. We need to keep the doors open for people that want to come, that are scared, that do need hope, and when their faith's being tested. And his attorney looked at him and said, are you willing to lose everything? Are you willing to lose your church, your income, your family, some of your friends? Are you willing to lose it all? And he said, I was. And he looked over at his wife, and the most profound words I think I've ever heard a woman speak, when he looked at his wife and said, are you with me? And she said, I'd rather be a widow than married to a coward. I hope Tina would say that. I hope that every woman in this room would say that. As Brian said earlier, and I don't mean this ugly, and I don't mean necessarily this church, there's a lot of men in this country today that are cowards. We need to step up, take responsibility, lead our families through the trying times and the good times as Joseph did, and move forward. Let's pray.